It's 1 o'clock.
Start the recording. Good afternoon. I'm Walt Bauer, and I'd like to welcome you to the Human Development Institute's third spring seminar. We welcome the participants who are joining us online, as well as the participants who are here with us at the University of Kentucky. Our presenters will provide an opportunity for questions this afternoon, and we welcome questions from all of our participants. Please type your questions in the chat box if you are online. Should you have any questions about CEUs, you can contact me. Please take a moment at the conclusion of the seminar to complete our brief evaluation. The evaluation will be sent to your email address after the seminar. It is really helpful as we plan for upcoming seminars. Now, to introduce today's speakers. Barry Whaley is at the Southeast ADA Center at Syracuse University. Jason Jones is at the Human Development Institute at the University of Kentucky. Steve Casisto is a university professor at Syracuse University. The title of the seminar is Service Animals and the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm now going to turn it over to our speakers.
Right. Thank you, Walt. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Steve, how about if I introduce the me and a little bit about Burton Blatt Institute, and then you can say something, and Jason. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, great. Well, both Steve and I, we work for the Burton Blatt Institute at Syracuse University College of Law. The Burton Blatt Institute is named for Burton Blatt, who is a beloved dean in the School of Education. Perhaps you've seen a book somewhere in your past called Christmas in Purgatory, where Burton Blatt entered state facilities in New York and was able to photograph the conditions there. Burton Blatt died very young. We're very proud to work for Burton Blatt Institute. Our mission is to advance the civic, economic, and social participation of people with disabilities in a global society. So, Steve, you want to add anything to that?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Barry. The Burton Blatt Institute does important consulting work around the United States and around the globe in areas involving disability, inclusion, employment, the law, disability in society. And we're lucky to have great allies around the United States, including the Southeast ADA Center. And it's a privilege to be here with all of you today.
And it's a good segue for me because I am Jason Jones. I'm the affiliate for the Southeast ADA Center. I'm Kentucky's representative to the group, and we do free consulting for anyone who has an issue based on the ADA and the law and what is required for business, both private and public business under the ADA. So.
Right. Well, let me give you a brief commercial before we move on. You've heard the Southeast ADA Center mentioned. We are a resource for everybody in the Southeast. We are based in Atlanta, Georgia. We cover 8 states, from Kentucky to Florida, from Mississippi to the Carolinas. And our role, excuse me, is really fourfold. We provide technical guidance. So if you have a question about the Americans with Disabilities Act, or you feel your rights have been violated, or you're just not sure, you can call our 800 number. That's 800-949-4232, and that will be up on a final slide today, so you don't have to write it down now. That will take you to one of our technical consultants, and you can ask your question. We don't provide legal advice. We do not enforce the law in any way. We provide informal guidance based upon our knowledge of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The other things we do is we provide training. That's why both Steve and I are here today, and Jason we provide training. Last year, well over 1,500 people were trained by our center. We also provide written material, and we provide research on the Americans with Disabilities Act. So those are the 4 things that we do. We're funded by NIDLR. NIDLR is the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. I guess let me flip, oops. NIDLR is part of the Administration on Community Living, part of the Department of Health and Human Services. So every 5 years, Southeast ADA Center receives federal funding to do this work. So, excuse me, here's our agenda for today. We want to talk about what is the definition of disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. We want to talk for a few minutes about what a service animal is. We want to talk about what a service animal is not. We want to talk about your responsibilities in regard to service animals, as well as the responsibilities of businesses. We want to talk about what are the responsibilities of the owner. And then finally, Steve is going to wrap it up. Steve is based in Syracuse today, incidentally, and he's going to tie this all together for us. Steve is an author, an accomplished educator, and he is a service dog handler himself. So that's what we're covering today. So to move on, so what's the Americans with Disabilities Act? The ADA is a landmark civil rights law that guarantees equal treatment for people with disabilities in our society. The ADA does not provide preferential treatment to people who have disabilities, but rather equal opportunity so that anybody can have full participation in our community, in shopping, in work, in all aspects of living in our communities. So that's what the ADA is. It was first passed in 1990, and it was signed by George H.W. Bush. After the law was passed from 1990 into the early 2000s, what we began to see was a narrowing of the protections of the law to the point where the emphasis was placed on you having to prove that you had a disability that had an impact in your life, rather than did you experience discrimination. So in the mid-2000s, the Congress said, no, you don't understand what the intent of this law was. The intent was to have a broad definition of disability, and the emphasis should be on, were your civil rights violated as a result of some sort of policy or practice? Often when people think about the ADA, the general public typically thinks about Title III. Those are places of public accommodation. That has to do with, can I get into a restaurant or a store? Can I access goods and services? Maybe people think also about Title II. Title II has to do with state and local government. So curb cuts, audible crossing signals, those sorts of things. But in fact, there are 5 titles to the law. So just so you're aware, Title I are the employment protections. That guarantees equal opportunity in all aspects of the employment process, from the time I am an applicant until I am an employee. So perhaps you've filled out an application and it says, can you perform the essential functions of the job with or without reasonable accommodation? That is a protection that is found under Title I of the ADA. Title II, as I mentioned, those are public entities. Those are state and local governments. Interestingly enough, the federal government is not covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You know why? Anybody want to take a guess in the room here?
Or online.
Or online? Yeah, you can type your answer online if you'd like. Okay. The reason why the federal government is exempt is because Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which is the law, the foundational law that the ADA is based on, covers the federal government. So in fact, the federal government is covered not under ADA, but on the mother legislation, the Rehabilitation Act. In particular, 504, Section 504, which prevents discrimination. Title III has to do with places of public accommodation, as I said. That includes sports arenas, stadiums, baseball stadiums, Jason Jones, Stores, restaurants, any place where people go to access goods and services, those are all covered under Title III. So that includes all aspects. Can I get in the door? Can I shop? Can I use the bathroom? Those are all found under Title III. Title IV are the telecommunication provisions, and we know that in the last 28, 29 years of the ADA, the way we communicate has changed dramatically. But still, these titles, or Title IV covers telecommunications, TTY, TDD, relay services, cap telephones, video chat features. So all those are found under Title IV. Then Title V are the technical provisions. So under the technical provisions, it includes who has enforcement responsibility for the ADA. Interestingly, one thing under Title V to point out to you, because it's going to come up in our discussion of service animals, is the ADA is only durable until there is a law that offers equal or greater protection. So for instance, if there is a state law that offers greater protection for service animals, for instance, then that law would supersede the ADA. So those are the 5 titles. And Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So what we think about mostly, or what most of the people think about with the ADA is that Title III region or Title III area. And these are just some examples of places of accommodation: restaurants, hotels, theaters, doctors' offices, pharmacies, and so on. Basically anywhere you go in public that's not owned by the government or is under contract with the government. And some exceptions to those are like private clubs and religious organizations, churches, and the facilities that they facilitate, I guess. So who's covered under the ADA? So, in order to understand that, we have to decide what a disability is, right? And the definition of a disability. So I always think of, make this a little more broadly, if you went out right now to change your tire, and you had a flat tire, how many of you could change your tire? Raise your hand. Without help. Okay, how many couldn't? How many would need help? So technically you have a disability, right? It's just the inability to do something. However, the ADA says a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, right? So what are those activities? Let's dive into just a few of them. All the things you would think of, right? Caring for oneself, performing manual tasks, seeing, hearing, eating, sleeping, walking, standing, lifting. Can anybody read it faster than that? Bending, speaking, reading, learning, reading, concentrating, thinking, communicating, working. Just being, right? I mean, all the things we need to function in our daily lives. Does our disability impact those things, and how profoundly does it impact those? Okay. And so here's some major, like some categories that you would think of, like immune system, the normal cell growth, digestive, bowel and bladder, neurological, brain, respiratory, circulatory, endocrine, reproductive functions. I think it's all covered there. Maybe not, if anybody else can think of anything to add there, but those are basically all the sections where one of those major life activities would fit.
And these incidentally come from the ADAAA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, as amended. When I mentioned that broadening of disability, that's where you see immune system, endocrine systems, neurological systems. So, as Jason mentioned, you have to have a disability, but not only a disability, but you have to have a disability that impacts a major life area. And there are 3 prongs of disability determination that you find in the ADA. The first is you have to have a disability. Seems pretty obvious, right? So not only that, but you have to have some sort of documentation that you have this disability. This disability impacts a major life area, and you need some sort of modification and accommodation so that you have equal opportunity. So after having a disability, the second thing, you could have a record of having a disability. Let's say, for instance, that you are a cancer survivor and your cancer is in remission. Although it is not impacting your life right now, you have a record of having a disability that impacted a major life area. So under this second prong of disability determination, you can still receive protection under the Americans with Disabilities Act because you have a record of that disability. That would also include episodic conditions, Crohn's disease, for instance. You know, it's kind of a cyclical thing where people are feeling pretty good for a while and then they have an episode that's impacting that life area. So that would be additionally having a record of having a disability as well. Now, the third prong, which is kind of interesting, is you may be regarded as having a disability. So the easiest way to explain this is perhaps you were in a car accident one time and you have some sort of disfiguration. Excuse me. Let's say you go in and apply for a job and you perceive that you did not get that job because of that disfigurement. Under this third prong of disability determination, although you don't have a disability that impacts a major life area, you could be regarded as having a disability based on the impression of a shop owner or an employer or someone you come in contact with. So you can, if you can demonstrate then that your civil rights have been violated, you may have protection under regarded as the third prong of disability determination. We also need to keep in mind, especially when we're talking about service animals today, that the majority of disabilities are non-obvious, okay? They're kind of invisible. When you consider disabilities that have impact on major life, the number one in this bulleted list is arthritis. You may not know this, but 31 million people in this country have significant impact of disability based on arthritis. It's the number one disabling condition in our country. In addition to that, 300,000 people have rheumatoid arthritis that has a very significant impact. So, but those are non-obvious. Those are invisible disabilities. So that kind of creates this problem, which leads to misunderstanding or stigmatization. You know, when you see someone at the Kroger, for instance, or ShopRite or whatever, and they get out of their car and they've parked in an accessible parking place, and you immediately go to, you know, what's that guy doing? He's abusing the law, right? No. Perhaps he has an invisible disability that we need to take into consideration.
So why does it matter? Which is kind of what we're here to talk about today. And the biggest reasons is there's, continues to be a lot of confusion about service animals and the rights of the individuals who use them. And hopefully we'll be able today to kind of cut through some of the common misunderstandings about service animals and how it relates to the ADA. So what's the big deal? The big deal is countless calls are made daily to the Department of Justice now about service animals. We're seeing these stories everywhere, right? The ADA requires state and local government agencies, businesses, and nonprofit organizations that provide goods or services to the public to make reasonable modifications in their policies, practices, or procedures when necessary to accommodate people with disabilities. The service animal rules falls under this general principle.
Okay. Guys want to play a game?
Sure.
All right. We're going to play Guess the Service Animal. All right. So I'm going to stand up for a minute, Walt, and hopefully turn my back to the camera here so I can see all the things. So how many people think a fuzzy brown bear or a grizzly bear is a service animal? Raise your hand.
Or even a good idea.
Or even a good idea. That's right. All right. How about the simian-looking thing here, baboon or orangutan, whatever that is? Anybody think that a monkey can be a service animal?
Yes.
Somebody says yes in the room. So we have some yeses for monkey. How many think a fuzzy kitty cat can be a service animal?
Could be.
All right, we have 3 people, 4 people. We have some people who think a fuzzy kitty. What about, I don't know, what is that thing?
It's a lemur.
That's a lemur. How many think a lemur can be a service animal?
That's King Julian if you have children. Yeah.
All right. People are shaking their head no for the lemur. What about a pig?
Yes.
Pigs. Yes, so they say pigs. What about the fuzzy little duck? Nobody goes for the fuzzy little duck? What about the cute little horse?
Yes. Yes.
All right, so that was a resounding yes from the people in the room here that a miniature horse could be a service animal. What about a dog?
Absolutely.
Oh, we finally got, everybody can agree on the dog, right? What about a bunny rabbit?
They're just terrible.
How about a cow? Could a cow be a service animal? All right, I couldn't trick you with that one.
We
Yes, sir.
have Mike online says all those are therapy animals except for the dog.
Oh, Mike, you got ahead of us. Dag on it.
Oh, I shouldn't have read that.
You shouldn't have read that.
Sorry.
All right. So neither the bird nor the emperor penguin. So the answer is
So this is the most disappointing, right? Because all those great things would make good service animals. But actually, the ADA Title II and III define a service animal as any dog, just a dog, that's individually trained to do work or perform tasks for the benefit of an individual with a disability. This, of course, includes physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or other mental disabilities, or...
okay. So, and we'll get to your question because I think I know what you're going to ask us. And
Mike said sorry.
that's all right, Mike. Don't steal my thunder again. So, and we'll get to your question because I think I know where you're going. So, the ADA says specifically, and this has been redefined in guidance, that dogs are service animals. Okay? Not the fuzzy little dog, not the kitty, not the grizzly bear, not the lemur. A dog is a service animal. But wait. The winner could be a miniature horse.
We really wanted to get a miniature horse to bring in today. For this part. Couldn't find one.
I could have won the show.
So when you consider that entities need to make a reasonable modification to policies to allow at times miniature horses to be service animals. So there are some things you need to consider. They need to be housebroken, obviously. They need to be under control. The facility has to be able to accommodate the animal, because they're substantially a little heavier than a dog. But what are some benefits to a service horse, miniature horse? Well, one is lifespan. I mean, the dogs in the room here, and Steve, I'm sure, will tell you about the dogs that he's had in his life. What's the lifespan of a dog? 14 years, probably a service animal working 10 to 12 years. So a horse can live up to 40 years, right? So that substantially you could have that service animal for a longer period of time. They have greater stamina than a dog. And they have pretty good manners and they're pretty smart. So in some of these other situations, you might see a miniature horse could act as a service animal.
So what is a service animal, right? So the ADA defines service animals as a dog, as we said before. The work of the service animal must relate directly to someone's disability. That word directly is very important there. Okay, so the dog and the services that it provides need to match the disability, right? And the cost to train a service dog varies from $20,000 to $50,000. And here's one of the big issues is that it costs a lot of time as well. It's not on there. And then when something happens with an animal who is considered a service animal by their owner but really isn't, and there's an interaction, if something happens to a service animal, you have to start the process all over again, and it could cost thousands of dollars again. So that's why there's such a controversy now with service animals versus comfort animals, those kinds of things. Extreme cost. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of service animals there are, just for example. And you all know these, but guide dog obviously is the classic of what we think someone who is visually impaired or blind has. That was my first experience years ago when I was 3 or 4 years old with a person we knew in our community, and everybody knew their dog, and that was my first experience. A hearing or signal dog for someone with significant hearing loss or someone who's deaf. A psychiatric service dog, which is fascinating what some of the things that these animals can do. It's amazing. And a sensory signal dogs or social signal dog, which is usually associated with people with autism and some of the services they can provide. And a seizure response dog is another one, which is fascinating. Dogs can predict the seizure. One of the ones that's becoming more prevalent all the time is diabetes, right? Someone who has very severe diabetes, and the dog can predict their blood sugar or sense when the blood sugar is too high or too low, which is fascinating to me. So, are there any other examples you all can think of? Tracking.
Search and rescue.
Okay.
And that's a lot of times is people who have intellectual or developmental disabilities like autism, where they have elopement issues and don't understand the danger of that.
Right. Great.
Can you repeat that for the people online, please?
Which part?
Her question, or her statement.
And she was talking about tracking. So when someone with autism, for example, has, what's the word you use?
Elopement,
Right.
wandering.
Right. So
they
they, the dog can track the person. Yeah.
find it by scent.
Yeah. Great.
Great.
Okay.
All right. So to differentiate, and we've kind of, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Walt.
Do you want to interrupt with a question here?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
What about dogs being able to detect pain or the onset of pain, such as migraines?
Sure. If it's severe enough, yeah.
Excuse me, I got a tickle in my throat.
I saw that.
Yeah. So, as Jason mentioned, and as we saw on our list, we define a service animal as a dog. But there are other animals that can perform tasks for people that are significant, that enrich their life. But they're not service animals. Go
I
ahead.
have another question. Do you want to?
Go ahead. Go ahead and take that.
Go ahead, take the question.
Questions from David. And the question is, how does the ADA protect people that choose to train their own animal or organizations that train animals? Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes.
Please.
This question is from David. How does the ADA protect people that choose to train their own animal
Right.
or organizations that train animals?
Do you guys mind if I jump in?
Please do.
Okay, this is Steve Kusisto from Syracuse University. The ADA only specifies that a dog be trained to assist a person with a disability. It doesn't say how the dog is to be trained, and it doesn't say that there are licensing criteria for training. So, for instance, if you're a blind person who has a considerable amount of understanding about dogs and orientation and mobility experience, you can conceivably train your own guide dog, or seeing eye dog as they're sometimes called. If you are a person who uses a wheelchair, you can conceivably train a dog yourself to open doors, assist you with handing money over to a cashier, locating things, picking things up off the floor. And under the ADA, those would be authentic service dogs. So there's wide latitude there, but the only absolute drop-dead serious criteria is that the dog has to be trained to assist someone with a major life function who has a disability.
Correct. We have a question in the back of the room, Steve. I'll repeat it.
I just wanted to say something about that. One of the things that is really, really important is if you're going through an organization, to find a reputable organization, because there are some out there who they just do it for money. And then you end up with a dog who's not trained, and it can become a real problem.
Right. Yeah, the commenter, Steve, and I'm sure you'll talk about your experiences with training organizations. Make sure it's a reputable training organization if you're one more question, then we'll.
I'm just going to make a point. The
Okay.
ADA does not cover dogs in training, only for.
That is correct. I was going to make that,
Yeah.
and then I got sidetracked. So the protections of a dog in training or a service animal do not apply to a dog that is being trained. So while the dog is in training, those protections do not apply.
This question is from Joe online.
Hi, Joe.
Is there any restriction to the breeds that are used for service animals?
Steve, I'm going to let you take that.
The answer
Woof.
to that is no. However, I will say that the guide dog schools, which breed their own dogs, because they're breeding for temperament, bravery, immunity to allergies, and so forth. They limit their dogs to Labrador retrievers, golden retrievers, sometimes Labradoodles or Goldadoodles, and German Shepherds.
Yep.
But for the most part, there is no actual limitation on a dog breed that can do the work, provided that it has the kind of stamina and ability to do the work.
And as an aside to that, Steve, next Wednesday is International Guide Dog Day. I don't know if you were aware of that. But the site I looked at right before we came in here, 70% of trained dogs are labs.
Correct.
15%,
and there's a reason for that. I'll tell you in a minute.
Yeah, yeah. And 15% are Goldens and 15% are Shepherds, German Shepherds.